Hi, welcome to Unit 2. Today we will be discussing interpersonal communication. First of all, let's ask ourselves, what does interpersonal communication mean? We talked about this in Unit 1 when we discussed the different strands of the communication process. Interpersonal communication is a term that we use to refer to person-to-person communication. So basically, as you see in the photos on the slide, any interaction between two people, whether it be a mother and child, best friends, co-workers, family members, this is all person-to-person communication. It does not have to be in an intimate relationship or a social relationship or a professional relationship. It's just one person communicating with another person. Something that we do in our everyday lives. So as we start off our unit with interpersonal communication, let's cover a few of the things that we're going to discuss in this unit. Effective interpersonal communication includes attention to verbal and nonverbal cues. We do know that when we use verbal cues, we're actually using words and speaking out loud to cue somebody to do something, or to answer a question, or to respond, or to give feedback. Nonverbal cues are when we communicate without using words. So this could be facial expressions, body language, even our tone of voice is nonverbal because it's not actually the words that are sending the message, but the tone. And we talked about that in Unit 1 when we went over paralanguage. Something else that interpersonal communication includes is awareness of gender, ethnicity, and age. I'm sure all of us are familiar with these terms because we see them quite frequently, but gender refers to whether you are a male or female. Ethnicity is what culture or race you associate yourselves with, and your age. Why do you think that these things should be considered and you should be aware of gender, ethnicity, and age when communicating interpersonally? Okay, next, understanding of proper etiquette. That word should be familiar to you. If not, you probably know the synonym for that word, which is manners. Etiquette means manners. It's important to understand proper etiquette when we are engaging in interpersonal communication because etiquette are those unspoken rules that we've been taught since we were young children. Saying please and thank you, excuse me, saying bless you when someone sneezes, holding the door open for someone coming in behind you. Etiquette basically sends the message to other receivers that you do have proper training, you have been taught the basic rules of life and how to function in society. So it's very important when in interpersonal relationships. Okay, let's discuss some factors that we could incorporate in our lives to enhance our interpersonal relationships. Enhance means to improve. 1, check for understanding.
Hey, he just hit me twice. Yes, he did. Are you sure it was him? It's only y'all two out here, Dad. Ain't nobody outside here with y'all. So you telling me he that fast? They not jumping me? Ain't nobody jumping me? No, ain't nobody jumping you. It's just him. Well, he must be an octopus because I saw a lot of stuff going by my face. Really?
When you are engaging in conversation with someone, it's often a good idea to pause and make sure that they understand the message that you are sending before you get too deep into that message. Otherwise, you have a lot of confusion and wasted time. Some ways you can check for understanding include you encouraging reaction and feedback, which can be as simple as asking, what do you think about that? Or do you understand?
谢谢，谢谢。
Please tell me you speak English. I'm Detective Carter. Do you speak any English? Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
Or tell me what you think I should do. Just basic questions you ask in a conversation to give them a chance to participate in the conversation and give their thoughts. Something else you could do to check for understanding is ensure the message received is the sender's intended message. For example, if you are discussing something with a friend, maybe where the party is Friday, and you interpreted that the party is at the YMCA Friday at 8 p.m. In order to make sure that the message you received is what the sender intended to send, you may want to say, so you did say that the party was Friday at 7 p.m. at the YMCA, correct? Or you may just want to double check the information to make sure that you've understood it correctly. And the same thing when you're giving messages, you may want to ask them to regurgitate that information to you so you can ensure that they have gotten the message that you are trying to send. Here's an example of checking for understanding. At a photo shoot for Beyonce's album cover, the photographer asked her to strike a certain pose. How could Beyonce check to see if she understood the photographer correctly? Okay. Next, another way to enhance interpersonal relationships is to actively listen. When you're actively listening, you are being attentive and courteous to show that you care about what the speaker is saying. You're also making connections between what each person says. So if you're involved in a conversation with multiple people, you do want to follow the conversations and make sure that you establish a connection between all of your friends or your family members or whoever you're talking to. You may be at work. If everyone's contributing information and thoughts to the conversation, you should make these connections. It's always important to be attentive and courteous because when you're speaking, you want that same attention, you want that same courtesy displayed towards you. Hopefully all of you are taking good notes. As we've discussed before in our previous units, it's important to write down all of this information. An example of actively listening: when in a conversation with others, it's important to listen carefully to each person, paying attention and being polite. Notice the Obamas are all tuned into what Michelle has to say. So, this is a good example of actively listening because I think it's obvious by their facial expressions that they're all in tune to Michelle and paying attention, being courteous, and letting her have the floor. Enhancing interpersonal relationships continued. Another example of enhancing our interpersonal relationships is keeping it clear. By keeping it clear, we're using facts and evidence to support our opinion. My opinion could be that there's a football team that's better than every other football team in the NFL. However, my opinion does not mean much if I don't support it with facts and evidence. What are some facts and evidence I could use to support that opinion? Maybe the team that's won the most Super Bowls. Maybe the season's track record. Maybe some of the stats from the individual players on the team that make them a quality team. Whatever evidence I use, I do have to have some documentation to back up my opinion. Otherwise, my opinion means nothing. You should also be specific. When communicating, there's a difference between general, which is really, really broad and unsure. For example, if someone says, where do you live? And you say, oh, I live in Texas. That's very general. However, if we're going to be specific, giving them your home address is really specific, or telling them what end of town in a certain city is very specific. When you're keeping it clear, it's important to be specific to avoid any confusion. Also, you want to provide examples and anecdotes. Examples really paint a vivid picture for any communication because they can actually see what it is that you mean by visualizing an example. And an anecdote really helps to keep it clear because an anecdote is very detailed. An anecdote is defined as a short personal story. A lot of times it's funny. You may remember some of your teachers giving you a short personal story if they're explaining a lesson to you that relates that lesson to their life and makes it a little bit easier for you to understand and maybe even see why that information is useful. So keeping it clear includes a lot of different factors, but these are just a few ways you can strive to keep your message clear. Here are some examples. Backing up your opinion with facts and evidence and specific information is really simple. For example, Ozanne High School is the most unique school in Beaumont because it's the only school in the area with a dance program, gymnastics gym, and video production studio. This is an opinion, clearly most unique. However, those are facts that give information about the school and may support that person's thoughts about Ozanne being the most unique. I'll give you a moment to jot that down. Okay. Enthusiasm is another factor that we use to enhance our interpersonal relationships. When you're enthusiastic, you make sure that you speak with interest and conviction. There's nothing worse than listening to someone with a monotone voice that sounds as if they could care less about what message they are sending.
Bueller, 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 Bueller.
Here.
Bueller. Bueller. Bueller.
So speak with interest and conviction at all times. Why would anybody care about what you're saying if it appears that you don't even care? So keep that in mind when you're communicating. I often have people come up to me and tell me about something going on in their life, but there's sometimes that I can't even figure out if they are really serious, do they care, are they concerned, because it just doesn't seem as if they really care. We'll give some examples on the next slide of speaking with enthusiasm. Regardless of the message you send, show that you care about what you are saying. SpongeBob is a great example of this. He speaks with emotion at all times. This alone makes listeners more interested in what he has to say. Now, please don't get me confused. I'm not saying that you have to go around communicating like SpongeBob does. After all, he is just a cartoon character, a drawing. However, he's a great example because if you recall on many past episodes, regardless if he was angry, if he was excited, if he was surprised, if he was sad, he always spoke with a lot of emotion. So you could always tell what feelings he was possessing at that time. This is so important in communication because we don't ever want to send the message to someone that the message is unimportant when really it is important. Yet that's often done because of people's lack of enthusiasm. So I use SpongeBob as an example because everyone is always pretty interested in what he has to say whenever he opens his mouth because he's so interesting and he speaks with enthusiasm and conviction.
What? Can I buy you a cup of coffee?
Oh, yes! It's funny because it's free. Anyone can have.
That's right.
Okay, now that we've discussed enhancing interpersonal relationships, let's move on to clear directions. And by directions, of course, you may be referring to a number of types of directions. You could be talking about directions to completing a homework assignment. You could be talking about directions to a specific location. Or this could refer to directions on how to do something, how to assemble a desk, or how to cook a pecan pie. We're going to go through the steps because no matter what kind of directions we're talking about, These are some great tips as far as keeping the directions clear. So we have an acronym, which the letters C stands for clear, L stands for light, E stands for easy to follow, A stands for accurate, and R is relevant. Let's go through these one by one. The first one, clear. Avoid generalities. And those are those very broad general statements we were talking about earlier. For example, if I say, oh, you have a test this 6 weeks, that doesn't give you much specific information to go off of. Is it the last week? Is it next week? Is it tomorrow? Is it today? We have to avoid being general by saying your test will be Monday morning. By keeping the directions light, we use brief statements with clear, vivid language. Using these brief statements, one keeps the readers, well, not readers, but receivers engaged in what you're saying. With keeping the information light, we're using vivid language that paints a picture for them. Brief means short, so you want to keep it short because people only have a limited attention span. If your words and statements are too lengthy and too wordy, they lose interest and stop paying attention. By keeping your directions easy to follow, you're organizing step-by-step directions with graphic elements to enhance understanding. That's a big wordy statement to just basically say, make sure your directions are step-by-step, and some pictures would help. Step-by-step directions are really important. And if you notice, if you're ever assembling a product, they usually have the steps numbered and they have pictures of each piece that goes into the product so that you know if you're missing anything and what goes where when you're putting it together. The same thing with a recipe. Your recipe goes in order. They're not going to tell you to add in the onions and bell peppers before you even turn the skillet on. It's all a sequential order so that you can have a quality finished product. And pictures are always helpful. It's always helpful to see what your destination looks like, if it's a map, what the product should look like, if you're putting something together and following directions there. Even when you're doing some homework assignments, some of your homework assignments may have a picture. You know that it's common in math. They always draw the triangle or the shape out for you to calculate the area. That makes it easier. Finally, another tip for clear directions is accurate. Test your directions before delivery. It's hard for us to give directions to our own home because we go there so much. So a lot of times we don't pay attention to street signs that may be down or a turn that may be blocked off. So before you give your directions to someone, go ahead and test them out to make sure they even work. And relevant. Avoid unnecessary information. Often you may engage in conversations with people that give you all of this extra information that is not needed. Make sure that you are not one of those people. Because again, if your statements are not brief, like we discussed up in the L for light, people tend to stop paying attention. So you want to make sure that you avoid unnecessary information, stick to the facts, stick to what's needed, and move on. Hopefully this slide is giving you some great information about keeping directions clear by making sure that they're clear, light, easy to follow, accurate, and relevant. Let's move on. Respecting differences in communication. As with anything, you're always going to have differences. Some people don't see eye to eye with others, and this can be for a number of reasons. Misunderstanding, misconceptions, and preconceived notions can lead to conflict, discord, and confusion. Issues of race, ethnicity, gender, and age affect the ways in which we communicate with one another. So basically, if you are dealing with people from all different walks of life, from different backgrounds, different ages, different races and genders, you may run into some confusion because everyone functions differently and your cultures have different backgrounds, which makes some things more important than others. It's okay to disagree. However, we have to respect others' differences. Just because someone looks differently or thinks differently, we cannot be rude or ugly to them and assume that their opinion doesn't matter. It matters just as much as ours does. Okay, let's discuss some professional etiquette and protocol. We're going to preview what we'll get into next with our job interview segment. Professional etiquette and protocol includes the who, what, where, when, and how. So let's start off with the who. Who, when you're in a professional situation, let's say a phone call, you're stopping by to inquire about a job or going into a doctor's appointment, you want to identify yourself by first and last name. This is extremely important. This is not someone that you know personally. So it's a business setting. So make sure that you state your first and last name. What? State the purpose of the communication. Are you calling to check on your job application? Are you coming in because you have an appointment? Would you like to speak to someone in particular? State what the communication is for. Okay, when? Determine alternate meeting time if necessary. You may have to make an alternate appointment. Let's say you're called in for an interview and they want you to come at 2 p.m. Well, 2 p.m. isn't really convenient for you because you're in school. So politely say, oh, I'm sorry, I will still be in school. How's 3:30? How's 4 o'clock? Go ahead and offer an alternate meeting time so that you still have a chance of maybe getting hired. Where and how. State where and how you can be contacted in the future. Of course, with situations such as professional appointments or interviews or anything that's not a social situation, there's a possibility that they may need to call you back later to give you additional information and additional details. They need to know where to contact you at. Will you be at home? Is email best? Would you prefer the phone? Would you like a phone call or a text? Just say where and how you can be contacted if something is needed later on. The who, what, when, where, and how is very important, but very, very self-explanatory. Hopefully this slide is giving you the information you need. This will definitely be on the test. Let's go through an example that applies the professional etiquette and protocol of communicating professionally. Times are tough and Snoop Dogg needs a job. He decides to apply Best Buy to work in the department promoting his early CDs. What should he say when he calls the store to check on his application? Snoop calls the manager at the store and identifies himself and the reason for his call. Hello, my name is Calvin Brodus. I am calling to check on the status of my application. Notice he doesn't say, hi, my name is Snoop. The manager then offers for him to come in for an interview that afternoon. However, Snoop has plans with his family that can't be changed, so he suggests an alternate time to meet instead. I will not be able to make it today. Is tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. available? Notice he's very professional. He immediately